Well, hi there, food friends. It's Kevin.
And Marianne behind the camera.
And welcome to Cavalcade of Food. And today we have got a vintage appliance video for all of our vintage appliance fans out there. And we are talking about, sister girl, today, the crock pot or slow cooker. So let's start with defining a term, okay? Crock pot is one of those names that is actually a trademark name, and while we use it sort of universally to talk about slow cookers, only rival brand slow cookers are called crock pots, okay? So crock pot is like Kleenex or Q-tip or one of those kind of brand names that have just sort of become a universal reference for that thing, regardless of the brand, okay? So we've got crock pots and slow cookers, and we're going to take a look at them. But first, some history. So those of us who were around in the 1960s and 70s might remember a lot of things, in particular when people sometimes see the crock pots, one of their comments is, "Oh, I love all those colors. Orange, green, gold, yellow, brown, really bright kind of tones, or what we would say earth tones," right, Mare?
Right.
Well, that's because the crock pot was really at its zenith, at its apex, in the early and mid-1970s, when things were very much in earth tone color, okay? You know, we think of appliances like refrigerators and stove, the avocado green, the poppy, the harvest gold, wood tone brown. These were popular colors. But also, let's think back on everything, because cars, furniture, people started putting up all this paneling all over their house, like Dad did, right? Dark. Okay, remember in the family room we had that thick shag carpet, and it was brown and green and orange and gold. And these were the colors of the time. In the late 50s and into the early 60s, it was very much pastels. White has always been in fashion, but pink and turquoise and bright yellow and seafoam green, and those were the colors of the 50s and into the 60s. But by the mid to late 60s, things were changing dramatically. Things culturally were changing. And we had a president assassinated. We had a civil rights movement going on. We had a war in Vietnam, which people had all kinds of feelings about. The hippies, rock and roll, baby, and all this stuff. The times, they were changing in the 60s, and the color palettes changed. And there was a rejection, in many ways, to the kind of the tail fins and pinks and pastels of the earlier era, and wanting to go back into nature and colors that were found in nature. Do you remember earth shoes? Okay, and all these things. You remember a pet rock? Okay,
Yeah.
well, rock was, but it was just this whole idea of things going back to more natural colors. And this was also a movement where things were going on, like in California, Alice Waters, the whole natural food movement, farm to table. All this stuff was going on There was a rejection by a lot of people of the highly processed manufactured foods of the late 50s and early 60s, Jell-O and squishy Wonder Bread and, all these kind of artificial and industrially processed foods. And people wanted real bread, and people started baking again and having a lot of salad. Salad was never like a main course, but it started to be thought of that it could be. And this was all changing, and it was reflected in our color palette for everything. So you look at cars, and they were gold and brown and green, and they were darker colors. And anyways, all that to say, things were changing. Another thing that was happening is the women's movement and the feminist movement, which was part of the civil rights movement. In 60s, going into the 70s, the ERA, I don't know if you remember this, Marianne, there was a drive for the Equal Rights Amendment, an amendment to the Constitution of the United States that would ensure that women had equal rights under the law, that they would be paid the same amount of money for the same job that a man did. Remember Maude, the TV show?
Yes.
Mom loved that show. Anyways, this was all happening at the same time, and that's no place for seafoam green and petal pink and canary yellow. This was earth tones, okay? And with all the appliances here, I say there's a lot of great small appliances, but the one appliance over and above any of them that is a model for the right appliance at the right time in history was the crock pot. Because in the early 70s, more women were working outside of the home, working jobs, professional work. However, women were still primarily responsible for feeding the family. And so along comes the crock pot with promises that you can throw all the stuff in the morning, and you can leave it plugged in all day. It won't burn the house down. And you come back and you can feel good about serving your family a hot, home-cooked meal. Who wouldn't want that? And so these things were flying off the shelf. Quite the opposite of fast food. They were slow food. But it was okay. You were busy doing other things during the day. But all of these social realities converged to create a perfect market for the crock pot. And we're going to look at some of these crock pots. But before we get to the crock pots, above the crock pots, you see these things up here, Mare?
Yes.
I call these the parents of the crock pot. This is what we call a roasterette, okay? And so this is basically a same idea of a crock pot. It's round. It has a well here. There are coil elements going around the sides of this. It has two speeds. If you put the plug in here, it's low. If you put it in here, it's high. And then you had a insert pan and a lid. And that's it. Probably wouldn't want to leave this unattended all day. These got fairly hot, hotter than a crock pot. But the idea was the same, and it was called a roasterette. And I have a few of these. These here are made by Everhot, which was these were manufactured in Ohio. And then we have a Nesco here, roasterette, Nesco. This is National Enamel Stamping Company, is what Nesco stands for. And that's because they made a lot of things out of enamel. Again, same thing. This is porcelain coated, okay? But also 2 speeds, low, high, depending on where you put your cord. And these were, well, let's just say somewhat popular, okay? But the concept was there with the crock pots, and then a guy came up with a bean pot. Now, Mary, you know I love baked beans, don't I?
You sure do.
And so, but to make beans is a low and slow kind of a thing. And to make beans really well, I think they taste best in like some sort of crockery, okay, a clay pot. And you had something like this. West Bend had, which is exactly a clay pot, okay. This is from the mid-1950s with a lid. So you had the ceramic pot, and then you had a hot plate, basically is what it is. This is a heat-right base. What is this? 95 watts, okay? And you put your beans in there, and this took some time, about 8 hours, 8-9 hours to cook. But they made them in different, and I may have shown these before, they made them in different patterns, but they are ceramic crocks. And they made these for a number of years, starting in the mid-50s, right until through the 1970s. Check this one out there. Here's a West Bend bean pot bicentennial edition. This, remember, 1976. We were bicentennial crazy, and it sort of had an early American motif on it. But it's basically the same as all these other ones.
Now, could you leave those unintended for hours?
Yes, you can, because again, that base was 95 watts. But the heat on the base was coming up from the bottom, not around the sides. And there was another guy who, I forget the gentleman's name, who had a bean pot that heated around the sides at a low temperature. And I think it was Rival who bought the patent, or he designed it for Rival. And it evolved into the crock pot that we see here. This book, Mabel Hoffman, now she was really the mother of crock pot cooking. I think I have a larger version. Her book was called Crockery Cookery. Say that 10 times fast, Toots. And there's Mabel on the back. Look at her. See, with a couple of her crock pots. A lot of people, let me know in the comments if you or your mother, your grandmother, somebody in your family had this book. Literally sold millions of them, because once you got your crock pot, there were some recipes that generally came with the crock pot, but then it's like, how do you use it? Well, here's a million recipes. And what Mabel did was she actually reviewed all of the major brands of crock pots. It's amazing how many different manufacturers there were at the time of, I'm sorry, slow cookers. I'm going to correct myself, because only Rivals were called crock pots. But what she did was she talked about them. She talked about how they were made, and what size they were, how much they held. And then she did a temperature analysis. So most crock pots have two speeds or two heat settings, high and low, and she would tell you what it was, how high was high and how low was low. So here's one. This.
It's not coming out good on the camera.
Oh, okay, that's all right. Well, anyways, but if you look through these, you can see that most of the temperatures here on high are probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 250, 300 degrees. Okay, so that was Mabel. But you had Better Homes and Gardens, Crockery Cooker. Here's one that Rival put out, and this was a very popular book, Crock Pot Cooking. Now, Rival could say that because their crock pots were actually called crock pots. And again, almond chicken, chicken and wine, burger and bean hot dish, beef and beans, Hassenpfeffer. Anyways, a lot of recipes in here. Here's another one. It was called the Unwatched Pot. Again, filled with recipes. Family Circle, Carefree Crockery Cookbook. So, you know what? I only show these to say that cookbooks about crock pots were a big business because people wanted to know how to make things now that they had their crock pots. Interestingly, to put it into more recent times, Marianne, there's all these cookbooks out now about, guess what? Air fryers, because now we all have air fryers, right? We have one at home, and we use it frequently, actually, and like it. But, what can you do in an air fryer? Well, there's a lot of recipes that tell you what you can do in an air fryer. A couple years ago, when Instapots were all the rage, there were all kinds of cookbooks about how to make things in an Instapot. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these. So we're going to start over here. Here's a couple. I really like the looks of this one. This is it says right on it what it is, 3.5 quart slow cooker with removable crock, J.C. Penney. So this was a J.C. Penney brand crock pot. And here's another one from J.C. Penney, a little earlier. This one is in bright, beautiful orange. And the difference is the crock doesn't come out. So initially, crock pots were made in a way that, you couldn't take the inside out. And it was fine, it still cooked beautifully, but it was kind of a pain in the butt to clean, okay? So the removable crock was a huge advancement. And so J.C. Penney, they offered their own then let me show this one. This is a Sunbeam. Again, look, avocado green. So what Sunbeam did, something very ingenious. Sunbeam was already making a deep fryer, okay? And they said, hey, what if we make a crock that'll fit inside the deep fryer? And then we can market it as a crocker, cooker, fryer. So it did it all. And This is the Sunbeam. These were fairly popular because they were quite versatile. Here's one interesting one. Hamilton Beach. Their crock pot, Simmer On. This is a Simmer On 2. And again, off, low, and high Hamilton Beach. This one's kind of got this brown gingham look. It has a plastic lid. Most of these are glass, but some of them did plastic lids. But of course, they're all clear so that you can look and see. But look at the inside of this, Mare. It's not ceramic. It's glass. It's a white, kind of a Pyrex type glass insert. It doesn't come out. It's not removable. But that was sort of a unique thing. I think there was something about the idea of cooking it in the ceramic crock that somehow made it better. Here's the same one in a gold gingham plaid, but this one has a ceramic. As you can see, this one's got a ceramic crock. Then here is a crockery kettle. Isn't that bright orange, Mare?
Yes.
And this one also has, this is an earlier one, it has a fixed crock on the inside, but you probably can't make it out. But at the very bottom, under the dial, is the Kmart logo. So this was at Kmart. And Kmart's brand of slow cooker was called a crockery kettle. Isn't that a crock? Crockery kettle. And I've got a couple of them from Kmart. Here's another crockery kettle, also from Kmart. This one is called the All-American Crockery Cook Pot. Boy, they all tried to change the name slightly because they couldn't say crock pot, so they tried to say it every other way. The All-American Crockery Cook Pot, the slow cooker. And it kind of has some early American, the Liberty Bell. There's George Washington crossing the Delaware. Again, I'm sure this was around 75 or 76 during the bicentennial when we were all crazy. Who made this? Grandinetti Incorporated, Linwood, California. So this is the All-American Crockery Cook Pot. Now here's one that I love because it puts together all the colors of the era. This is a Flavorite electric crockery slow cooker. But if you look at it, Mare, it has, you often saw this sort of vegetable medley here, artichokes, mushrooms, of course, peppers, tomatoes, but it's gold, green, and orange, and brown all in one. It hits every color scheme, so it'll match any kitchen decor. Reliable manufacturing company, Franklin Park, Illinois. So they got in on it. This one is a fairly large one, but it has a fixed insert. Anyways, here's a Crock Watcher. Here's another Sunbeam Crockmaster automatic slow cooker. Ooh, how about a gourmet? I have one in gold and in orange. This is a gourmet casserole. Now this was a very inexpensive. This you would have bought at a discount department store like a Corvette's. Remember those, Mare?
Yes, I do.
So This has a plastic, didn't melt, but it has a plastic exterior, and it has a fixed, oh, no, it does come out. It does have a removable crock. And this is by American. And it also has a time-matic control. So these evolved into something that was called an auto shift. And you'll see that on some of the older crock pots, where it would start on high, and then after so many hours it would automatically shift to a low. Now, to show this one, because this will be familiar to my sister. Can you tell us about this one, Toots?
Mom used to have that one.
Yes, Mom had this one. And this is a West Bend. And it actually worked in a little bit of a different way than the other crock pots, because all the heat here came from the bottom. Rather than many of these, most of them have heating along the sides. But this one, the heat was just at the bottom because you had this pot. But the nice part about it was you could use this pot on your stovetop as well. So if you wanted, to brown something, or you just needed a larger pot to use, you could do that. And Mom had this exact same one. She used it quite a bit. And this also had a variable heat control. It goes from 1 to 5. So that was also something a little bit different. Here, let's see. This is now this is a rival crock pot, and this particular one was fairly popular. And this was, it even says on the front, removable server. So this was, again, a big deal. This has a plastic lid, but look at this, Mary, it's got a little vent. So depending on what you were cooking, if you needed, if it called to have some evaporation going on, you could vent the lid a little bit and have some of that stuff reduced. Oh, I've got a couple here in the box. Here we go. Here's a Rival Deluxe Crock Pot Electric Cooker Server, 4.5 quarts. And I'll tell you, roast, stews, vegetables, soups, cakes. Cooks all day while the cook's away. That was the Rival's slogan. And this one, here's your little book that you got in your Rival crock pot anyways. And this was sort of a starter recipe book. There's a lot of great recipes in here. This one has a detachable control because the actual it's a plastic top, luckily. The crock does not come out, so you have to put it under the sink, and it's nice that you can take the heat control off. Some of them you couldn't do that, so you had to be really careful when you watched it. Well, I could go on and on. I have a lot of crock pots, and crock pots are one of those appliances that are still being made to this day and are still fairly popular.
Bless you.
This is dusty. Oh, I gotta dust this stuff. Made me sneeze. Anyways, but I just wanted to share these because crock pots are great, also helpers for when you're entertaining in terms of keeping food warm, like on a buffet or something like that if you're serving over a long period of time. there's a lot of versatile uses for crock pots. I've had it where people have done like mulled cider and mulled wine in a crock pot. It's wonderful for that. And Mayor, we're going to ask our food friends if they have a favorite crock pot recipe, because crock pots are so pervasive. I mean, there's so many people who have crock pots that chances are they've had experience using it. So if you have a favorite crock pot recipe, please share it in the comments, or a crock pot story. Love reading those comments. So, all right. This was Crock Pots here at the Cavalcade Collection. As always, I'm going to say thank you for watching. I appreciate your time and your interest in vintage appliances, because it's always nice to connect with kindred spirits there. And we have a website. It's called
Cavalcadefood.com.
You heard my sister, cavalcadefood.com. You can go there and check things out. And I just want to thank my little sister for working the camera today. Thank you, honey.
You're welcome.
I do appreciate it. And we'll thank again our food friends. I hope everybody is well. And we'll look forward to seeing you again back here real soon on Cavalcade of Food. Bye, everybody.
Bye.